Hey everybody, welcome back to Sounds Like a Drum, Cadence Independent Media Production, Cymbal Series Day. Today, talking about one part of cymbals, we're going to use ride cymbals for this, we're talking about the bell and what it does to the sound. Most cymbals you see have a bell, a hump in the middle. It's kind of a built-in feature of most any cymbal we see these days, unless you're dealing with one particular type that we do have one of here today. We'll get to that later. And what we want to talk about today is what it contributes to the sound of the cymbal, both in terms of playing the bell and also the behavior of the rest of the cymbal. The three things to talk about with a bell are the diameter, the height, and the thickness of the cymbal at the location of the bell. Some cymbals are thinner at the edge, thicker in the middle. Others are more kind of evenly distributed in terms of the weight. We have a few examples today, and we want to demonstrate how they interact with the sound through a bunch of playing examples. First up, kind of the house cymbal here is made by Jesse Simpson. It's a modified Sabian AA raw ride. It's thin, it's about 2,000 grams. Sort of a kind of standard shape of a cymbal, not too high, not too flat, sort of a medium-sized bell. The main thing to take away from this is it's not a super thick cymbal, but there is some high end contributed from the shape, height, and thickness of the bell. Another word that we would bring into this conversation here that sometimes is talked about with bells of cymbals is integrated. In that case, we're talking about how hitting the bell kind of activates the rest of the cymbal. It's not so much of a separated sound that just goes ding, 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 and then the rest of the cymbal is kind of in another world unto itself. Let's hear a little bit more of this particular cymbal. Now, what we like about this one here, beyond the fact that it's very easy to record, it's not particularly thick, it's not particularly loud, is that it's crashable, and it also has a nice bell sound if we want to demonstrate things with a bell. The bell is part of the crash sound. A flat ride, as in a ride that has no bell, doesn't really open up when you crash it. It just sort of makes a sound and dies immediately. The bell of the cymbal, in terms of the shape and height and everything else, actually influences the crashability of that cymbal and just how open it can be. This one goes all the way to open like it's a crash cymbal, but because of the rest of the construction, it's very usable as a ride as long as you're not really laying into it. Now, going a little bit in the other direction, but structurally similar, we're going to dig into a 20-inch Constantinople. This one has a little bit more meat in the bell, a little more weight, but the shape of the bell is basically the same. This is a 20. It's a little bit heavier overall, but the weight of the bell is the thing that we're really listening for here. Immediately in this cymbal, you can hear that the bell is still a little bit integrated, but it's a lot brighter, it's a lot clearer, it has a lot more volume, especially if you get right on top of it. It's a little more usable for Latin things or things where you want that sound to kind of carry out to the audience. And it is also contributing more high end to the crashability of the cymbal. It actually kind of raises the pitch of everything. And this is, of course, a 20 where the previous was a 22, but nevertheless, that high end that you hear, that zing and shimmer, that is coming from the bell. Let's hear a little bit more of that one. Now, of course, there are profile differences, there are weight distribution differences. Every cymbal is a little bit different, but the main thing that we're trying to take away from this is that there is a voice in the cymbal that is the bell, that's part of playing on the body, it's part of crashing it, obviously it's part of hitting the bell as well. And depending on what you're looking for, you can look at the shape of the bell of a cymbal and have a little bit of an idea of how it's going to behave, provided that you know the weight of the overall cymbal. Certain cymbals that I've had in my life had a very thin body, and then there was a ton of weight in the bell, and those are the ones where you start to hear kind of like a high-pitched singing frequency when you're playing the body of the cymbal that starts to get a little bit frustrating, a little bit hard to listen to. It can exist in hi-hats too. I've experienced that, where the chick sound in the hi-hat had like a little sort of squink on top of it that frankly made them unusable for the kind of music that I was doing at the time. Now, let's go in the other direction. We're going to pull out a Craig Lauritsen 22-inch super thin cymbal too. It's also around 2,000 grams. This one has very little weight in the bell, and it also has kind of a mini bell profile that frankly isn't really meant to be played as a bell anyway. Now this is a fully integrated bell. It doesn't really have a separate sound from the body of the cymbal. When you play the bell, you hear the shimmer of the rest of the cymbal. The idea here, though, is that if there was no bell at all, it wouldn't really have much in the way of crashability. So adding this little bit of profile to the center of the cymbal turns it into a great ride cymbal that has some spread. It's dark because there's not a lot of high end getting contributed from the bell. And then when you play the body of it and put a crash in there, it's a relatively quick crash, but it does crash all the way, which something with no bell wouldn't do. Let's hear a little bit more of that one. So this for me normally is like the flattest cymbal that I use on a gig. And normally I don't use flat rides because they do have a bit of a volume ceiling. They have a certain kind of character that I think of as a bit specialized. And with a mini bell situation like this, which has become popular and a lot of companies now are making kind of large dark cymbals with a tiny bell so that you can crash them, this is the one that I keep around for that kind of situation. It also is really great for textural things, for swells, anytime where you want a big kind of like waves crashing on the beach sound, but you don't want that crispiness on top. And now for something completely different, I did bring the one flat ride that I have. Let's check it out. Now, this is a special cymbal I got 15 years ago for, I think, like $30 because it had cracks in it. As you can see, it doesn't have the cracks in it anymore. I cut them out with a hand file, basically, and that was just something that I thought would work. It did work, and I still use it. It probably sounds a little bit different because of those bits of metal missing, but suffice to say, it's super dead, but it has a nice kind of clear stick sound. It's crashable to the extent that a flat ride is crashable, but you can hear, obviously, that the bell's not usable because it doesn't have one. There's not a lot of high end in it. There's also very little sustain, which is a component of bells, and the weight and size of the bell as well. And it's fair to say that this is a cymbal in like the simplest sense of the word. There's not a lot of difference between the edge and the center, and that is because there's no bell. You know, it's the weight is distributed the same kind of way, but there isn't that center for it to kind of expand from. You can kind of think of it as almost like an amplifier. The bell amplifies whatever else you're doing to the cymbal, and the smaller the bell, the less amplification is happening. Let's hear a little bit more of that one. Now, listening back to that, you do see the benefits of a flat ride, and also cymbals that have a smaller bell, but in general, you're bringing stick definition to the forefront, you're lowering sustain, and you're basically going for maximum articulation. Now, this is a ridiculously thin flat ride. It's an 18, and it's about 1,200 grams. It's not really a production flat ride. Is from a thing called the 7-sound set that Paiste made back in the day. So it's pretty old and sort of an unusual beast, but suffice to say that if you're thinking about definition, clarity, and also consistency, where you want kind of all of it to sound similar in character, flat rides can be great for that. Also super important to mention that flat rides are not flat like a pancake. They all have a little bit of profile to them. Some of them are close to dead flat, but if you get all the way to flat and have no tension on the metal at all from hammering and profiling, it's not really going to behave like a cymbal anymore. You're getting more into thunder sheet kind of territory, which is cool too, but bear in mind that if you see flat rides, they do have a profile to them, and that's going to affect the sound of the cymbal the same as it would a traditional one. All right, that about sums it up. Thanks for watching and following along on the cymbal journey. There's going to be more things about bells in the future. We may get into that with hi-hats and some more like use case scenarios and things like that. But something I did want to mention is if you're curious about how much bell sound on your cymbal is contributing to the overall sound, you can always take a little piece of moon gel or a little bit of tape or something and just put it on the bell and start to kind of mute the bell a little bit. And you'll start to discover just how much that bell is affecting things. And conversely, if you're having problems with high frequencies or sustain with your cymbal, different ways of, like muting the bell and muffling it, things like that. Oftentimes I'll use the bottom felt from a hi-hat as the felt on my ride cymbal because they're larger, a little more surface area, brings the highs down a little bit. The world is your oyster. Try all the things, but remember that it's a sound. It's a usable sound. All of them are. There's no right or wrongs here. Just looking for the thing that makes us happy.